And Bart with his Legoed stadium background, ladies and gentlemen. He is back from the Wasatch. It is the Soccer for USPOD's Bart Keeler. How was the trip?
Look, if someone has to go spend several days in the Wasatch National Forest to go cheer on this team so the players feel like they mean something, even though they clearly don't want to play all that well on the road, I will volunteer to go follow this team on the road to destinations like Salt Lake City. If someone has to do it.
Hey, the kids seem to work their ass off. They seem to appreciate it.
I was wondering, Jared, honestly, why Luke Brennan wasn't in the game, like, I don't know, not at halftime, but like at 60 minutes. Because I feel like that game needed a Luke Brennan, just like, hey, bud, go run really hard.
I'm thinking that you might need him you're going to need him for 60 in tomorrow. So
yeah, that was the thought I had, obviously, well, on the way home, which was a journey in itself.
Yeah, I saw on your anybody who follows Bart on social knows how much of an adventure it was for him to actually get out of Salt Lake and get back to it. Got back this morning, literally at the crack of before dawn Thursday.
Right. Well, the red eye from Denver was always the plan. The problem was I was expecting a longer layover in Denver, and I have friends in Denver, so I was like, oh well, I'll go get dinner with them, and like I had like a long 10-hour layover in Denver. It's like, oh well, that'll be cool. I can go out of the airport, go see friends, get dinner, and then come back in. That did not happen because Frontier, which by the way, I have had very good luck with Frontier. Okay. This is just happened to be one of those days where one plane was delayed and that means another plane was delayed. And so my flight that it was originally at 1:30 Salt Lake time got pushed back to, I don't know, it still hadn't left when I left Salt Lake. I switched to a flight at 6:30.
Frontier doesn't deserve the fire that it gets.
Oh, I've never had bad luck with Frontier until today. And it was only one flight that apparently bad thing happened. Even the flight that I came back to Atlanta on, they said that they had some weather issues coming out of Atlanta so it was delayed a little bit by 30 minutes.
I like Frontier. It's not Spirit. Calm down, everybody.
Oh, God.
Yeah, no, it's not. Frontier are good people. I won't talk badly about them, but they got me home. So, hey.
Spirit is like DB Cooper Airlines. They just sit you in a seat and say good luck.
Like, hey, look.
If you would like the plane to land, that'll be an extra $40. Yeah, otherwise, you're just jumping.
Right. Hi, Abby. Hi, Will.
We do have apps, and I'll go ahead and do this as a breaking news sounder. It's earlier in the Twitch pitch than Bart's arrival, so I'll go ahead and do this. Abby lets us know that the Abstermobile is no more. 348,665 miles. She just signed over the title, and the mechanic knows someone who needs a good home for a 2010 Honda Odyssey. 348.
Sorry to hear that, Abby.
665. I think she beat the Beast. I think the Beast had in 345. I think you just beat the Beast out. But figured we go ahead and have that as a breaking news. After all of the time.
Sorry for your loss, Abby, but I know you're excited I know you're not. You say you're not necessarily excited for a new car because that requires learning a new car. But I'm excited for you to get a car that will make sure you get from your house to the airport.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the trick. Yes, you don't have to be excited to have to replace something that means that much to you, but then when you get into something new, I hope you will enjoy what it gives you and the modern luxuries of these smart cars, basically.
Yes.
Not a real smart car like the tiny ones, but like nowadays cars are
intelligent.
Do everything.
Not a scrunched vehicle, but an intelligent vehicle.
Yes.
Smart. 10 of 8 this morning on the Today Show, Bart.
Yeah.
It was Eastern time. You end up with the list of folks that are being sent over to Paris to represent the United States, and one of them is the kid from Morningside, whose dad has a pizza.
Ain't that I'm sorry, I'm blowing the explicit rating. That's the fucking coolest. I'm sorry. I'm just so excited for this dude. I'm sorry, John. That deserves.
Don't apologize to him.
Why? Why are you apologizing to me for blowing the explicit rating? It's an understood on a morning show. Come on.
I know. Caleb, I cannot express how proud we all should be of Caleb, because he has just put in so much work to. I mean, we're talking about $10 million transfer to Chelsea, and then Strasbourg or whatever the A to C to B to F goes, but
right.
like
this oligarchy structure in soccer is some BS,
whatever.
First of all,
but I mean, like this kid grew up playing soccer in the streets, playing in free rec programs as a kid, to becoming our most productive homegrown player. A guy who is, I mean, seen across the league as a very good left back and a promising future men's national teamer. And now he's, sealing that with his ticket to Paris for the 2024 Olympics. And that is just like, that is awesome. And I know there's been a lot of hand wringing about what the Atlanta United Academy actually produces. But this thing is barely 10 years old, if that. It's 2024 is, we're not even 10 years into this academy structure, and we've got a kid going to the Olympics. That is awesome. And then, we'll throw Miles in there a little bit because he was developed in Atlanta United's system.
I will die on the hill that we should give Frank de Boer some credit for Miles's development, because he wasn't 100%. Playing under Tata. And you gave him to a Dutch center back manager, and he turned into a monster.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, I think both of those guys are a testament to what Atlanta United had built early on, and especially for Caleb to watch him come up right before our eyes, and become. I mean, he's had an interesting season. I think it's fair to say that he, in my opinion, has stagnated, but I feel like that's just because he does need to move to Europe. I was chatting with someone in the stands at the game while we were being blinded by the sun that we needed. He was like, "Oh, I don't know why Caleb's going to Europe. It's too soon. He's only 19." I was like, "Because he needs to. He cannot grow anymore, right? He's got to go find a bigger pot to go let his roots sink a little deeper, and so he can grow taller." Physically, I think he's still growing. Every time I see that kid take the field, I swear he's getting bigger. And this is another just like a great step for him to prove how good he is on literally a global stage.
Right now, the rest of the group, and we can get into snubs and such.
Yeah, how do you feel about the guy who put up a goal and 3 assists being told that he's not good enough for the Olympic team, but he can be an alternate if he wants to?
Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping that the coaching changes don't just include the senior national team coach.
Buddy, your lips to God's ears.
Yeah.
Because that. I'm sorry. That John, go through the roster, and then we'll talk about the dude who bossed us.
Okay. All right. So here's how it was released. They had a nice presentation on social media that didn't get into all of the names. But here's how it is. 15 of the 18 capped by the full U.S. men's national team. Keepers, Patrick Schulte, Gaga Slonina. Defenders, Maximilian Dietz, Nathan Harriel from Philadelphia Union. Miles, don't know him. John Tolkien, Caleb Wiley, Walker Zimmerman. So basically, you've got 2 Georgian of your defenders.
Yep.
One that came through Gwinnett and one that came through Soccer in the Streets.
Yep.
Midfielders, Gianluca Busio, Benja Kremoski, so he's landlocked now, Jack McGlynn, Georgi Mihailovic, Tanner Tessman. So 2 from Venezia are in the midfield. Forwards, Paxton Aronson, Taylor Booth. So Aronson and Booth, both from Utrecht in the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
Duncan McGuire, who is somewhere in transit between the Purple Team and Rovers, I guess, Blackburn. And Kevin Paredes from Wolfsburg, Griffin Yao, who is at Westerlo, who we know from his time at DC United. Your alternates, Josh Atencio from Seattle Sounders, Jacob Davis from Sporting Kansas City, to be joined by fellow Sporting Kansas City and John Pulskamp, and Johan Gomez from Eintracht Braunschweig in Germany. That's your 18.
Say that last one again. Eintracht what?
Eintracht Braunschweig for Johan Gomez out of Germany in Keller, Texas. So that's your 18 plus 4. And from what I understand, I was looking at notes earlier today. It appears that our friends at Monterrey were asked about possibly releasing Brandon Vasquez, and they were like, nah, fam, not going to happen.
They paid a lot of money for him. I understand.
Still trying to figure out why Cincinnati released Miles. Cincinnati doesn't have a center back to stay.
I know. No, and they released him for Copa, and he didn't play a dang minute.
I had flashbacks to 2017 when we released Brad Guzan to the national team, and he had to sit behind geriatric Tim Howard, and that was when Brad was like in his prime.
Jarrett, we're not talking about that. We're not talking about the bad place.
By the way, I have an offer on the table. Cincinnati, you need a center back. I will give you one Luis Abraham. I will give you Luis Abraham and some Gam Tam, whatever you want. Wow. I request one Yuya Kubo in return, please.
Oh, see? That wouldn't be a bad. I'd love to see that happen, but I don't think that's going to happen, sir. So Diego Luna and Brian Gutierrez were ruled out because not because their clubs refused to lend them out, but it was because they basically were like, nope. And so,
I'll put a pause light on the Brian Gutierrez thing. Okay. Chicago hasn't really played ball with him before this. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a little unfair to say, oh, well, yeah, he can go now when he hadn't been allowed to go to any of the other camps. And despite him being a very good player, I think that is absolutely true. I understand why a guy who hasn't been a part of really any U.S. youth camp isn't suddenly being called up for the Olympics when he has had zero integration with the coaches or the system. Now, let's move on to Luna.
Sure. Well, and then there's also the Cade Cowell discussion if you want to get into
that. Cade Cowell is not as good as people want him to be. There's the end of that discussion.
Cade Cowell's entire career is what if. Thank you, Bart. You beat me to it.
Yeah.
I like Cade Cowell. He just isn't what he isn't what
he's a great kid, it seems like. Being. He's got a great head of hair. Dude looks like he could lift a semi-truck, but
he looks like Max's brother in Stranger Things.
He does. He needs to be working. Does he? Yeah, I like that. That's a good shout. Who was also the Red Power Ranger, by the way, in the newest edition of the Power Rangers movie. I don't know
Jesus.
And also Australian.
Well, I'm also going to point out real quick that the original Red Power Ranger, if I'm not mistaken, is still locked in the state of Texas. He can't leave because of he committed fraud on COVID funds. So I think he's still he couldn't attend conventions because he still can't leave the state of Texas.
Okay, the Green Power Ranger is still part of the Power Ranger franchise somehow. So there's that.
Yeah, that's my childhood. Jason David Frank passed away last year. So
he was up working with the Power Rangers franchise, I think, up until the moment he died because he was on some
needed the money
series when my brothers were coming up watching it. Anyway, that's my childhood in a nutshell. Power Rangers. I had all the
anyway.
Brought to you by
Savan. Mm-hmm. I think the Diego Luna snub is I mean it's a catastrophic miss from this program, and I think if you want a example, just a anecdotal example of the things that you actually can criticize U.S. soccer for right now, I think Diego Luna is one of them, and he is such a crafty, gritty, skilled, and determined player. I understand that there are literally physical limitations. The dude's 5'2". I think he and Luciano Acosta, but both of them pack a whole lot of offensive talent. And not that, and that's the thing is physical size shouldn't matter. Look at the best player in the dang world. He's all of 5'6".
Sure.
On a good day.
Put him in my pocket.
Yeah. I mean, if you put Messi on top of a podium, he might be taller than Miles Robinson. I don't know. But I think, when you're evaluating a kid like that, it's hard because at the youth age, you see all the skill, but you wonder, how does he handle the durability of being just small? But you see what he's done in MLS, not just this year. And he's been a professional for a long time. I mean, he came through USL, goes to RSL. I think this was one of those players that, I understand it's an 18-player roster, so you do not have a whole lot of spots, but you're using an overage spot for Georgi Mihailovic, who I like a lot, by the way. Georgie's like another one of those what-if players, but you somehow couldn't find a way to get Georgie and Luna in the same roster because reasons. I just think that that's a bad roster build and bad talent evaluation. And I think, if you want to cede some points to U.S. soccer on this, I think it's fair to say that Luna has never looked great in a U.S. shirt, but neither has Georgi Mihailovic, which is the reason that he hasn't been a mainstay for them, despite him having a whole lot of attacking skill. And I think, Greg specifically, we know had a whole lot of input with Mitrovic in building this roster. I'm sure Crocker, when he's not in England, had a lot of say into this roster. And it wouldn't surprise me if even like Oguchi Onyewu had a lot of input into this roster. But why they couldn't find a way to get Diego Luna, on this team is a failure, to be quite honest.
To answer your question, Ropes, it is Marko Mitrovic. He is the Olympic coach. And Marco is a part of the discussion. Henry Bushnell had a deep dive. And here's just to give you an idea. It's over at Yahoo. Bushnell's title: Why Olympic Men's Soccer is a JV event, parenthesis, in which the U.S. could contend for a medal, close parenthesis. And he goes to the whole rule changes and how it ends up with the U23 adjustment with the 3 exceptions and all this kind of stuff. It appears that only 2 of the world's top 100 ranked players are going to be present: Julian Alvarez for Argentina and Ashraf Hakimi for Morocco. And so here, Bushnell refers to it as this: most of the 288 players instead will be up-and-comers or middling veterans. None of the U.S. men's national team regulars who appeared at the Copa, not even under 23 stars like Gio Reyna, are on the U.S. squad, which was announced Monday. FIFA recognized the games back in the 20s as amateurism, and that has complicated matters. You end up with quarrels between FIFA and the IOC dating back to pre-World War II. In the 80s and 90s, the IOC unwound the rules surrounding amateurism, but then FIFA had become the larger party, the larger power in soccer over the IOC at the time. And so you end up with a bunch of compromises. In the 80s, countries from outside Europe and South America could field all their pros, but any European or South American who had played in a World Cup wasn't eligible. 92, the U23 rule replaced the uneven restrictions. In 96, you get the 3 overage players added, and that's what's been in place since 1996. To your point about Berhalter and the negotiations, apparently U.S. hopefuls reportedly denied included Pepe, Malik Tillman, we mentioned Brandon Vasquez, and Haji Wright from Coventry City. Mitrovic, Berhalter, and their peers around the world have had to piece all this stuff together. And to your point, the idea of the discussions among Berhalter said the second barrier was participation in Copa America. Copa and the Euros were the priority tournaments for 6 Olympic contenders from Europe and the Americas, packed more prestige, according to Bushnell, and prize money, and they took place weeks before the 2024 games. So the U.S., Argentina, France, and Spain all take their A teams to those tournaments, knowing that those A team players would need a break because you've got the European calendar, the Copa, and the Olympics. That means you've got a rest in there somewhere. And so post-Olympic break, maybe, but you've got Julian Alvarez and Hakimi as your 2 big guns out of the top 100 that are going to be a part of what's going on. So, so there's a lot of navigating, gnashing of teeth, and wagging of index fingers about this whole process.
And that's the thing, is that these rosters, the Olympic rosters for every nation, are not straightforward. You don't just pick your best U23 players, your best 18 or your best 15 or whatever way you want to go about it. But because you do have to navigate the club who, especially for the Olympic tournament, a lot of these European clubs, the Olympics go through for the men's side July 30th. Yes. And, that bumps right up to preseason camps for a lot of European teams. I mean, you think about the Premier League starts in August. That is going to be a problem, a barrier to clubs releasing players, especially important players. Now, that said, again, with a lot of the MLS clubs, they're willing to play ball. Most of them are, looking at that time period as more of a Leagues Cup break anyway, and that's not a real tournament, so who cares if you win it? And you can afford to lose a player for that tournament. Especially, taking the examples of Tolkien and Wiley, right? Those are U23 guys who start every game at a very important position for their clubs.
Right.
A guy like Duncan McGuire, who, whether or not he's playing with Orlando City or wherever, still he was starting for Orlando City, and they were willing to let him go enough. It's hard because you do have to convince them to make that decision. And that's why you saw, I think, almost a year ago, this group for the U23s for the Olympics kind of started coalescing around players who you basically already had assurances from their club teams that they would be going to the Olympics. And that's the thing about Luna that does bother me, is RSL would have let him go, and you never fully got him in. Again, with Gutierrez, Chicago was being weird about it.
Chicago? Weird? Never. No.
Yeah. Who knows? That club, I don't get it. If you're going to be bad, that's fine. But if you're also going to be so bad that you then think that I need this one U23 player to make me not as bad, I don't get it. RSL clearly needs Luna, but they were willing to let him go for this tournament. And, a lot of other players, if you're asking, where's this player? I mean, again, you talk Gio Reyna, you talk Ricardo Pepi, you talk Malik Tillman, you talk, right. All those names, their clubs were like, nah, we need them. Which is fair.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about a lot of these team players on the U.S. men's national team still. Yunus Musa, I believe, is still Olympic eligible. Those guys aren't getting released by their clubs for good reasons. So this is, it's always going to be an interesting one. Now, because people don't believe that women's soccer is a professional sport yet, they don't have the same rules on the women's side. And that continues to be a sticking point on top of the only 18 players on the roster, which is a joke in itself. And all of these things do cause there's a lot of if-thens and conditional statements and, all these factors that go into creating a roster. And we get that. And again, that's kind of the issue with a lot of these youth tournaments, period, is you never have your best 18 to 23 of that age group. You never do, right? These same reasons, because they're not FIFA approved. They're not FIFA windows that are approved, that are mandated that you have to let them go, right? But this one is, again, the Diego Luna omission is still one that's going to loom, I think, large over U.S. soccer's head for a number of reasons. And I'm not saying he's going to magically make us win a medal, right? I don't think that anyone's saying that. It's just, you looked at him. I mean, John, you saw what he did Saturday, which may have been an anger, but
I absolutely think it was in anger.
But he the dude can ball, and at some point you have to go, yeah, the dude can ball. And I think good Lord, we're deviating into it. The biggest criticism that I think anyone would have of the Berhalter regime is it was so about Berhalter's system and not about individual players coming together to be better. It was all about how does the system play out and how do these players fit into the system, rather than how do you create a framework for the players to express themselves individually and succeed together. And Diego Luna is unfortunately a byproduct of a coach who believes so highly of himself that he thinks that his system is somehow going to win the day, despite time and time again proof that that's not how this works, especially at the international stage.
Oh boy.
He's still employed.
Yeah.
And I think it's shameful because any other country who thinks a damn of itself in the international soccer game, he would have been fired by now. And I'm sorry, that's just the reality. You don't get grouped in a home tournament and keep your job. You just don't. And I'm sorry, that's just where we're at with this right now.
Well,
and the fact that they still have to go through these damn review processes and make a PowerPoint or whatever the hell is taking so long.
Well, and that was one of the other topics that I wanted to get into you with this morning. Obviously, they're now saying midweek. So I guess keep an eye out for some kind of a bat signal from me if
it just happens. John, this all strikes to me as U.S. soccer being so arrogant, and maybe it's just Matt Crocker, I don't know, that they couldn't perceive that. What do you mean, Greg Berhalter? He's the best American coach that's ever American coached. Why wouldn't he be good?
But don't you have to? And I mean this in the legal sense. I don't mean this in the sense of just going through steps. That you have to go through some kind of a legally binding process to make sure that your opinions and your evidence is buttoned up, so you can.
The evidence is you got grouped in a home tournament. As the coach, you have to pay for that. You cannot change the players on the international stage. The players we have are the players we have on the U.S. soccer team. Like the men that we have in this pool, we can go out and maybe hopefully find another dual national.
Yeah.
But they can't change. And yes, I agree that you do have to go through some legalities and make sure of all that. But the review and this constant processes and reviews and data and analytics, and it's just he didn't win.
Sounds too corporate.
You lost 2 matches at home.
I'm just saying, I'm like, I understand the idea of a corporatized process to make sure that everything is laid out the way that it's supposed to be. But they're saying now midweek before probably one of the largest fait accomplis this side of fait accompli was ever dropped into Webster's dictionary. So maybe the new picture for fait accompli will be this review process. You've got that to look at in the middle of the week. You've got the question, who was it? Abby, how long before the Olympics can you change the roster? I think that's why you have the 4 alternates, correct?
Yeah. So the 4 alternates can be changed only due to injury once the tournament starts. And I think you have 24 hours before the tournament, before your first match.
So you have basically until the 23rd of July to figure it out.
I think that's the rule. Because if you also remember, these games do start before the Olympics start, if you will, because you have a long time to play them. They do kick off before the opening ceremonies, but I'm pretty sure it's 24 hours. But this is not they would still have to be replaced by an alternate if they make any change. You can't just bring in a new player.
I want to bring in a new player. No, that's why you've got the 4, the 2 from Kansas City that are attached to this.
Right. This is a roster submitted to the IOC or whomever. FIFA, I don't remember.
David says, so the U.S. crashed out of the Copa on purpose to open up the player pool? I wish. Oh, I wish. But yeah, and Katie Weaver says, the Mexican Federation would never. You're right.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. It's look, you don't want to be Mexico where you fire a coach just because he, I don't know, tied someone. You just don't want that. But the reality is, Greg you have a mountain of evidence of what type of coach Greg is and the type of results you're going to get under Greg. And the reality is, he's not going to move you forward more than he already has. Look, what he did for the 2022 cycle, I think, again, he was a good coach for that group at that time. He needed to be able to he needed to mentor and guide and steer a group of young players back to the World Cup. He got out of the group, a very tough group, didn't lose a game in the group. Great job. And then gets wiped by Netherlands, a very good, experienced team, whatever, a blue blood, almost, if you will. The most successful nation to not win a World Cup. Sorry, Netherlands. But now you have not seen any sort of progress in the second cycle. And that's the thing that's frustrating is Greg even had the 6 months time off to reflect. And I don't know, maybe he needed to go on a hike in the woods to figure out what soccer needed to be played like going forward. But he didn't. And what we're seeing now is not a better version of soccer, and it's not a better version of this team. And it's not just the Copa tournament. When you look at Nations League, how you were a 90 plus 5 minute own goal away from being eliminated in the semifinals of Nations League. It's not like this was just a bad showing. It's also the perfect time to make a decision, to make a break, to move on to a new coach, because you do have 2 years, right? Mm-hmm. And again, if Copa America was your test run and you failed the test, you have to make changes. You don't just do it again and hope it works.
Oh, you've got to have a cold review, Bart. Come on now.
Yeah. But again, and I understand a little bit what you're saying about the legalities. I totally do, right? And that's why I understand why he wasn't literally fired the next day, Yeah. But what are those review processes? You've got lawyers on retainer. U.S. Soccer, you've been in court since the mid-2010s. You have lawyers.
Got that coming up in a couple of weeks too.
Yeah, we have another.
Mm-hmm.
That's why our ticket prices are going up, right? Mm-hmm. Not to pay coaches, to pay legal fees.
Billable hours. You got to figure out where to get it back someplace.
I'll give you some billable hours. Fire the damn dude.
Oh, goodness. So David wants to know who plays in Ligue 1 France that can join last minute. Actually, I think anybody in Europe.
I mean, Balogun.
You get well, that's true. You get Valerian Balogun in there quick, but anybody on a quick flight that can bring in.
Yeah, I mean,
Air France, I think you'll be okay.
Pepe's in Amsterdam. No, not Amsterdam. Eindhoven. That's a quick train ride. Yeah. You got a couple kids in Belgium as well.
Alex Tillman's with him.
Yeah. And Alex up there. I mean, you got a couple guys that are just a quick channel away, if you will. Exactly. To be fair, also remember, this is the cool part. They are playing more in the south of France. They play in Saint-Étienne, Nice, and the women are in Marseille. So that's kind of cool.
Yes. And David blames Mrs. Reyna. If she didn't start this disaster to give U.S. Soccer fear of a lawsuit, he would have been gone 2 years ago.
That's absolutely incorrect, David. Absolutely incorrect. I'm sorry. He would have been hired for the second term, and he would have stayed on. His contract, yes, ended after the tournament. They would have renewed the contract. It was very clear that they wanted to keep him on. And to be fair, at that point, he had given you no reason to not keep him on, right? Outside of I think, as we all agree on this show, second cycle managers don't work.
Nope.
Unless you are a guy who has built a program from scratch, like a lot of, sorry to say it, island nations or smaller nations, or you're Didier Deschamps, who has gone to 2 World Cup finals. You don't deserve to just stay on. Even to an extent, Southgate, I think, has overstayed his welcome.
Yeah.
But he's at least gotten you to semifinals of tournaments where England hadn't even done that in the past several decades, despite what they think about themselves. And Greg is just, again, he got you to a point. Thank you very much. We appreciate your work. Go continue to make U.S. Soccer better with your coaching somewhere else. And we're going to go find a guy who can make us better and take what you've built and continue to grow it. And who that person is, I have my thoughts. I really do hope that this process, John, is not also considering who the new coach is right now. As much as I would like for them to have an expedited and what the John Wooden quote, be quick, but don't hurry. Have Correct. A quick process to find a new head coach. Yep. You don't need a new head coach until September, right? You do not need to make the decision. And that's why I'm a little concerned about the Cherundolo rumors. I'm not hating on him. I actually think, as I've said multiple times on Twitter, I think he's actually the guy you should be looking at for 2030 cycle. I mean that sincerely. The 2030 cycle might be a really good time for Steve. He's got to change his approach. He can't just... And I agree. And that's the thing, is if you're looking at him right now, I don't think that's the type of guy you want for this team, right? And I also think that if you're U.S. Soccer, you cannot, and this is the statement that American Outlaws, Barra 76, and others have put out, you cannot miss this opportunity.
No.
But I think U.S. Soccer is enamored with the idea that a U.S. born or whatever coach is going to somehow be the guy leading this team in 2026. And I'm telling you, I don't care. I don't care. I want a good coach leading this team to a quarterfinals or more. And I don't think there's an American coach out there right now who has proven that he can do that. Even everyone's star boy, Jesse Marsh, who I'm sorry, Canada's not played. They have a lot of effort and grit. And that's very much mid 2000s, early 2000s US soccer, right? Which is fine. That's where Canada is at their stage of development.
Very Red Bullsian of them, yeah.
Yeah. And you're telling me that the problem with that is, and this is where I definitely I do not like the Jesse Marsh ideas that people think that, oh, we should have hired him. Well, let me rephrase. I do think Jesse Marsh would have been a better international coach than Greg in some capacities. But if you talk about a guy who's committed to a system, he's just as committed to his system as Greg is to Greg's system.
Right.
And if you deploy the Jesse Marsh system, you have a lot of players in this player pool who aren't going to fit that. You're telling me Christian Pulisic's going to do that?
Yeah, Christian Pulisic will be a Red Bullsian press monger. No.
That's not, and you don't want that, because now you're excluding Reyna, you're excluding Pulisic, possibly excluding Serginho Dest. Three of your best players in your player pool don't fit that system at all.
Yeah.
That system works for Canada. A bunch of guys who hustle, work hard, and know, I guess kind of where they are.
The grinder way, for lack of a better
grinder way. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with, I'm not decrying it. I'm just saying that's not going to fit with a guy like, even like a guy like Tim Weah or Flo Balogun. They're not grinders like that.
You're not going to
you got to find a coach who's
and try and go, counter and go short field, little possession, be clinical, that kind of stuff. No, that's not how it works here.
No, you do. I would like a coach who shares some of the philosophies of Berhalter and the fact that you want to have the ball. Again, I think I'm an Arsenal supporter, and the reason I'm an Arsenal supporter is because they play pretty soccer, but there also needs, on the international stage, you need to have a level of pragmatism. And I think that's always something that Berhalter has lacked. And so you need to go find a guy who can build a system around the player pool. And a guy who can work with players and push players to make them better. And I think, again, that's where we saw with Greg. I don't think he was able to get the best out of the guys consistently. And that's also very disappointing, because that's your ultimate job as a leader of anyone.
Another couple of minutes here with Bart, because I know he's got like real world stuff now that he's back from the Wasatch range and has made it back here in one piece. At Soccer for USPOD at Bartimus Prime 19. Abby, roster is set a day before competition begins. So basically the 23rd of July for the U.S., but that's why you have the 18 plus 4. That's why the plus 4 are there as your alternates in case there is an injury. If you have to go deeper than the plus 4, then you probably have to massage some IOC rules when it comes to bringing in an alternate.
You got to bring in like someone other athlete, like just go get one of the sprinters.
Right. Katie Weaver saying you got to make a big splash for the Home Soil Cup.
100%.
Then Michael Valverde says, not convinced the current player pool is sacrosanct. Let's build a team that fits best together that requires role players too.
I mean, I think the problem though is that and this is where I've seen this narrative is one, yes, the players are to blame. They did not perform well at Copa America at all. They deserve the blame. But when you talk about build a team that fits best together, okay, fine. But which players make you better, and who are you replacing them on this current route? This idea that, the players like Greg because they knew that with Greg, they were going to start in 2026.
Right.
And I'm y'all, we're 2 years out from World Cup. I'm not saying it can't happen, but we've talked about this a lot on the Soccer for Us pod, is that the core group of 15 to 18 is pretty set, because those are just your best players, man.
Mm-hmm.
there may be some role players that should come up, like, and some players that maybe should be dropped. I mean, I think you're looking at a guy like possibly Brendan Aronson losing his spot, but that's also not like a done deal. He'll just be fighting, you know, and while that may make the bottom of the roster better, neither of those guys are, you know, whoever Brendan or whomever plays that position is not going to make you markedly better at a World Cup necessarily.
And what I would ask in these situations where if you think a roster needs an adjustment, I would ask, okay, who are you bringing in, but then who are you getting sending away?
Right.
In this kind of
and again, this is a national team. You don't just buy and sell players, you know? So to your point, which American magically comes in, you know, and there are some that absolutely should be pushing for starting positions. I mean, we just talked about several. I mean, Griffin Yao might be coming up. Kevin Paredes might be coming up. You know, how does Duncan McGuire fit into the system? I mean, the striker pool is weird right now because you have Balogun, who I thought had a really good Copa, and then a bunch of guys who are pretty good. But like in the midfield, you're telling me we're going to just magically find someone better than McKennie, Musa, and Reyna? Someone better than Adams? I mean, we've seen Johnny try to get a run out, and he's been okay. You know, I'm hopeful that Tessman is the one that I think who probably will captain this Olympic team, by the way. I'm hoping that, you know, I'm hoping that Tessman can, but okay, content. I'm sorry. Like, I understand what you're saying. I'm not dismissing the idea of bringing in new people. I'm saying none of those people factually are better than the guys who were starting the games in Copa. They just weren't. So I understand that locked in starters is never good. I think the problem was complacency and the lack of accountability because they were comfortable with Greg, and Greg wanted to be liked by the players, which is fine. You want to be respected. You don't necessarily need to be best friends with these guys.
Right. And that's the thing. You're out there to win trophies and get titles.
Right.
Yeah. So Michael Love already gave you that. Katie Weaver says, I think maybe it's the idea of picking Ream over another option because of his comfort level with Anthony. Say a cohesive backline is good.
I've been on the side of we need to get rid of Tim Ream just because he's old and he's not going to be a viable option for 2026, and we need to start moving forward. But did you see Cameron Carter-Vickers play soccer? It was not very good. He got lucky to not give up a penalty kick against Panama. He was very bad in the friendlies beforehand. Miles not getting a run out.
So then is this where Walker comes back into the discussion?
No, I'm sorry. Walker played like what? 2 full matches in MLS this season. That was the other problem with Copa is like Walker was, I mean, I don't know what his health status is at this point. I don't think anyone does. I get your point, but like, no, I don't think Walker's that guy. He's also on the decline on the age side of things. I understand the idea of you need to bring in new players. I am for that. But Greg has brought in new players. I mean, this is not a guy who has just kept the same 23 his entire time. He even turned over several of them from the 2022 World Cup to now.
Right.
It's just that at the end of the day, you have 15 to 18 guys that those are your best players. And if you leave, like, if you're talking about some of the fringe players, again, a Brendan Aronson, a Christopher Lund, you know, maybe, sorry, y'all, Miles, maybe CCV, who are you replacing them with? You know, if you're talking about a center back, is Mark McKenzie, Austin Trusty, those aren't necessarily upgrades. And so while you should be turning over stones, it's unfair to say Greg didn't turn stones over. You know, he was exploring the depths of the player pool as he could. The reality is we have a very good good player pool, and it's better than it ever has been. But we have at least 15 guys who are just they're clearly the best in the player pool, and we have some positions of weakness like center back and goalkeeper right now that, unfortunately, again, it's not like we're just going to magically get a better American center back.
No, that's true. And then there are some folks with this particular Olympic lineup that if they continue playing the way that they do, then maybe they get looks at.
And that's fair, John. But that's again a point of we have 2 overage players coming in as center backs, so that shows you the depth of the center back pool. Period. As you have Miles and Walker.
Noah Cobb in 26, brother. That's what we need.
Why not? How do you overcome complacency? Well, that's my point, is that it was an accountability thing, right? So the complacency came in because everyone felt comfortable, and that's fine. You want some level of comfort, but Greg wasn't holding them to be better. He wasn't holding them accountable. And that's not, well, again, it's not, they're always in, I mean, if Christian comes into camp thinking that someone else isn't going to take his spot, right? There are other people playing left wing, but I'm telling you that there's not a player who's just going to magically take Christian Pulisic's spot.
Yeah.
Okay. There's not a player who's magically going to come in and be better than Weston McKennie. Okay. We don't just go find these players off trees and say, oh, there's the American soccer player tree. Let me go pick a new fruit today. And that's the issue with the international game. This is not, taking Atlanta United for an example. So sorry. Actually, no, I don't have any problem saying this. Well, Ronald Hernandez has been a trash player for how long, making $8 million more than he should. And we can go find another backup, not very good center back, right back, left back, and pay him half, right? You can do that in the club game. You can say, well, Brooks Lennon isn't performing this year. There's a good option. Brooks Lennon can't seem to track a guy on his back shoulder. Maybe we need to go find another right back. You can do that at the club game. That doesn't happen at the international level. And again, that's why 2-cycle managers don't work. Yeah. And that's what we're getting in with Greg, is that, and it's not a bad thing to be friends with the guys, but a lot of the comments about, oh, well, we don't ever talk about soccer with Greg. We talk about life. And it's like, that's fine. But at some point, you got to be holding their feet to the fire to say, hey, how are you making yourself a better soccer player today? How are you taking steps to improve your career? Having hard conversations with guys like Eunice and Tim Weah right now, say, hey, really cool that you're at a big name club in Italy. You're not playing much, are you? Maybe consider moving somewhere that you play a lot that's not AC Milan or Juventus. You can play a whole lot at Roma and still be in, Serie A. You can go to France. It's maybe a half step down. But if you're playing for Lyon or Lille or, one of those
Marseille,
clubs, Marseille, Nice, Rennes, all these clubs that good enough, these you can, if you're, that's the conversation you need to be having. And I think that's where Greg failed in this second cycle. Again, it's not just about, oh, we got to go find new players. If you think that Greg and his staff don't know of all the American-born soccer player or American-eligible soccer players, that if you want to believe that, that's fine. You do that. But there's not a player, now, again, I think that they have missed on some players, but even if you're talking Diego Luna at the U23 level, Diego isn't necessarily going to make the senior national team magically better either. He's not. Is he better than Luca De La Torre, who's the 4th best option on the midfield, or maybe 5th with Malik Tillman? Yeah, maybe. But, you can't just keep bringing guys into camp because you do have a somewhat limit on that. It's not like you have a contractual limit, but at some point you just can't have 80 people in camp. And so, again, that's why you change coaches at the international level, because that is the turnover you can do. And that's just how it works, unfortunately. You get a cycle and you do what you can. And, most of the time you have to move on after one cycle.
I was going to get into the Cucurella handball, but we are way the hell over time with you. Thank you for doing that.
We're talking about throwing off someone's head. That was new. I have not seen that to that level of force.
The Basong areola incident.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like that was, if y'all haven't seen it,
Yeah.
I had to go back and watch it about 7 times on this trip because I did not. When I first saw it, I was like, "Oh, he just kind of threw it against his head." Right?
No, he threw it at him.
He launched it at his head. And Paul, you're lucky you didn't get punched in the face, brother.
Well,
probably just because you're so short, he couldn't reach you.
Well, the end result of that, Basong got a red for violent conduct after Areola threw the ball at him and crowned him with it. And
I think Areola deserved a red card as well, personally.
Yeah. So
I think that may I think that may go to the disco committee.
Yeah. So the way, and we'll play the audio for this tomorrow, if we have time. We might end up having to play it on Wednesday. Basong ends up getting a red for violent conduct. Then Areola gets a yellow for unsporting behavior. So that's the differentiation.
I think he should have got a red for violent conduct as well. And I know that sounds really harsh. I do it wasn't that he just tossed it against his head.
No, he crowned him. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, that needs to go to the disco committee, and it would not shock me if Paul Areola is not playing next weekend.
Yeah, and so anyone who is attached to either Indy 11 or Atlanta United is saying, okay, hey, when you guys play on Wednesday night, go ahead and go for it. You guys want to take out some more frustrations on Wednesday after what happened last night? You go right ahead. And so that's what Atlanta United.
I do want to say.
Yes.
Natalie Simon, I thought, did a good job of managing that situation because that was one of those where sometimes, actually a lot of times, professional soccer players act like stupid kids. And I thought she did a good job of getting in there and avoiding some situations. She managed the rest of the game after that pretty well too. So good job at that. But good Lord, it was a situation where everyone was being stupid.
Yes. And so play stupid games, win stupid prizes. All right. So obviously the bat signal's out for you this week. If anything happens after the administrative review, and what else is going on with the Soccer for USPOD?
Well, now that we have the Olympics roster, we'll be doing a double roster episode today to get the
double roster.
Men's and women's Olympic rosters. The women's less controversial than the men's, but really both of them are pretty straightforward for different reasons. Yeah. Women obviously play some friendlies this weekend, Saturday against Mexico and next Tuesday against Costa Rica before they go off to Paris. To my knowledge, they do not have any sort of pre-game or pre-tournament set up for the men. That probably will change once they get to France. I'm sure there'll be some closed door inter squad practices, scrimmages, whatever you want to call them. Sure. So we'll be recording the roster stuff out this week so that we can get that out before the Greg situation takes over
the administrative review. Cycle. Absolutely.
Got to make that PowerPoint.
Yes. As always, my friend, great to have you on for the national perspective of things. And obviously when the administrative review is over, we'll have you back and we'll talk about stuff.
10 out of 10 recommend going to Salt Lake for that trip, by the way. Okay. Beautiful scenes, very nice city. Public transit takes you from downtown to the stadium, which you cannot say for about half the stadiums in MLS. Looking at you, Dallas, Frisco. Very highly recommend it. But we won't play them again for another 8 years because MLS forces us to play the entire West Coast of teams before we get to play anyone else in the West Conference.
Still waiting for the trip to Austin, man.
No, John, we have to play the LA teams, both LA teams every year. Because schedule balance or whatever. Stupid.
Yeah. So we'll keep an eye on that. And here's something for the Soccer for USPOD from David. Does anybody watch the Alex Morgan, Sophia Smith-Reese's ad? Yes, I have. Trying to find out if that was made pre or post roster release and if there were any tongue-in-cheek commentaries.
I mean, it's not tongue-in-cheek. It's just that Alex Morgan didn't deserve a spot on the roster, despite what everyone says about, they need the experience and leadership there. I mean, she didn't belong on the roster. You got to play better.
And this is why you listen to the Soccer for USPOD. Before you go, what's the mug and what's in it?
Share. Oh boy, this is not working.
There we go.
And it's coffee.
Of course. Yes.
Turn back time.
Ow. Got to get it right.
Ow. Yeah. Love it. Share it's coffee. I'm gonna need another cup of coffee this morning because I am tired.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, go for it. Go get your second cup of coffee, my friend. We'll catch up with you after the Berhalter review.
Yeah. Y'all be good. See y'all in Kennesaw, because Kennesaw State is a great university and I love it. I'll see you there tomorrow night.
Be good.